It all started with a sticker. A simple, court-ordered notice on my storm-damaged garage. But when the HOA president, Karen herself, ripped it off in broad daylight, she had no idea she just broke the law. That one arrogant move? It triggered an investigation, exposed her abuse of power, and turned me from a quiet homeowner into a community hero. This isn't just about a garage, it's about standing up, fighting back, and changing everything. Let me tell you how it all went down. I was crouched in the driveway, one knee on the warm concrete, sweat beading on my brow as I tightened the last stubborn bolt on my son's bike. It was a quiet Saturday morning, the kind where birds chirp lazily, lawnmowers hum in the distance, and for a brief moment, suburban life feels almost peaceful. My son Jordan had been begging me to fix the brakes on his hand-me-down mountain bike all week. It wasn't a big job, just a rusty caliper and a bent cable. Nothing I couldn't handle with a wrench, a little patience, and the classic dad toolkit. He was bouncing around the front yard barefoot, kicking a half-deflated soccer ball across the grass, occasionally stopping to peer over my shoulder with dramatic impatience. "Is it done yet?" He'd ask for the 10th time. "Almost," I muttered with a smirk. And then it happened. The peaceful buzz of the neighborhood was suddenly shattered by a piercing sound, screeching tires. Rubber against asphalt. Loud. Sharp. Angry. I didn't even have to look. I already knew who it was. But I looked anyway. Up the street, a shiny white Lexus RX, polished to a blinding sheen, came to a dramatic halt in front of my house. The vehicle jerked slightly as it stopped, as if the driver had slammed on the brakes more for effect than necessity. The engine sputtered into idle, and for a moment, there was silence. And then, like a storm cloud with pearl earrings, Karen stepped out. The door flung open with a swift pop, and out she came, heels clicking on the pavement like a judge walking into a courtroom. Her floral blouse fluttered in the breeze, her sunglasses big enough to qualify as riot gear. Her trademark bob haircut, as rigid as her personality, didn't move an inch. Karen wasn't just any neighbor. No. She was the self-appointed queen of Greenfield Lakes, the enforcer of rules, the guardian of property values, and the tyrant of taste. Officially, she was just the HOA secretary, but in her mind, she was judge, jury, and executioner. She had written me up once for leaving my trash bin visible 10 minutes before the pickup truck arrived. Another time, she left a 3-page letter on my porch because I dared to hang a hammock between 2 trees, unsightly she called it. I barely had time to rise from my crouch when I saw her eyes laser focus on something near my gate. Her face contorted into that expression I had come to know all too well, the Karen grimace. Lips pursed like she just sipped expired lemonade. Eyebrows drawn into a permanent frown of disapproval. She clutched a manila folder like it contained the secrets of national security. I stood, dusted off my knees, and glanced toward what had caught her attention. Then I sighed. She was staring directly at the county-issued enforcement stickers I had placed on my gate and mailbox, bold orange and yellow notices that looked more construction zone than suburban charm. I hadn't put them there for fun. They were court-ordered, part of an official legal process after the neighbor's dead tree had crushed my garage and shed, which the HOA refused to help clean up. But of course, Karen didn't care about backstory. Karen saw ugly, and her HOA radar went full DEFCON 1. She stormed up the driveway, her heels stabbing the concrete like it owed her money. She didn't look at me. She didn't greet me. She didn't even glance at my son, who had stopped kicking the ball and was now watching her like a deer caught in an HOA headlight. Instead, she pointed one perfectly manicured finger toward the stickers. "Those," she barked, "have got to go." I raised an eyebrow. "Morning, Karen." No, don't morning me, Mr. Thompson," she snapped, mispronouncing my last name like she always did. "Do you have any idea what those things do to curb appeal? They're tacky. They're offensive. People are starting to talk." I folded my arms. "Karen, those are legal notices." She scoffed so hard, I thought her pearls might fall off. "I don't care if the governor put them there. This is a neighborhood, not a construction site." At this point, Jordan had wandered behind me, hiding half his face behind my leg. He whispered, "Dad, is she mad at you again?" I nodded without looking away from Karen. "Looks like it, buddy." Karen marched up to the mailbox, ignoring everything I just said. She peered at the sticker, squinting like it was written in a foreign language, then turned to me. This is vandalism." I'm going to have to report this to the board. You are the board, I said flatly. Well, she huffed, then I'm making an official record right now. She opened her folder, clicked a pen, and began furiously scribbling something like she was writing a police report on a criminal mastermind. That's when it hit me. She didn't read the sticker. She didn't even look at it for more than 2 seconds. She had no clue it said, Notice of Legal Action, Protected Document. Do not remove. Violation of this notice is subject to fine or prosecution. And in that moment, I realized Karen was about to make a huge mistake. The moment Karen stepped out of her Lexus, it felt like the temperature in the entire neighborhood dropped 10 degrees. She didn't just exit her SUV, she launched out of it, slamming the driver's side door shut with a sharp thud that echoed down the street like a warning bell. The sound made a couple of sparrows scatter from my maple tree. Even my neighbor across the street paused his lawnmower to glance over. She had that look again. If you live in an HOA neighborhood long enough, you learn to recognize it. The look of someone who's convinced they were put on this earth not just to water their begonias, but to enforce order, as if they're on a sacred suburban mission from God. Karen didn't walk up my driveway. She marched. Chin high, shoulders squared, sunglasses low, jaw tight. Like a petty war general with a clipboard instead of a sword. And the clipboard, was legendary in our neighborhood. Rumor had it she had documented over 400 separate infractions in the past year alone. From crooked garden gnomes to Christmas lights staying up 2 days too long, if it was slightly out of HOA guidelines, Karen had written it down, in triplicate. She gripped it now like it was a holy artifact, papers fluttering from the slight morning breeze. Each step she took across the driveway clicked with her heels, sharp and deliberate, like the ticks of a countdown before a bomb goes off. Excuse me. She barked, as if I hadn't already been watching her like a hawk since the moment she braked into my property. She was already flipping through her papers with a dramatic flair, pen in hand. She didn't even bother saying hello. Karen believed pleasantries were for people who followed the rules. Not for criminals like me, apparently, people who had the audacity to have court-ordered stickers on their property. Did you get my letter? She asked without looking up. Letter. She finally made eye contact. The one I taped to your garage 3 days ago. I raised an eyebrow. You mean the note that said remove graffiti or face action? Yeah, I read it. Also read the part where you signed it, HOA officer in command. Didn't know we had military rankings now. She narrowed her eyes like I just spat on her begonias. Mr. Thompson, this isn't a joke. We have rules. And you are clearly, violating multiple sections of our community aesthetic code. I opened my mouth to respond, but she cut me off with a raised hand. She turned, pointed dramatically toward the sticker on my gate, and said the line I knew was coming, "These things are offensive to the integrity of the neighborhood." I followed her gaze. The sticker was big, sure, orange background, bold black letters, clear county seal stamped on the corner. But it wasn't graffiti. It wasn't an act of rebellion. It was a legal notice following a very messy property dispute. Anyone who took 10 seconds to read it would know that. But Karen didn't read. Karen assumed. She moved closer, tapping the corner of the sticker with her pen like a disapproving art critic at a museum exhibit she wanted shut down. You must be aware, she said, her voice growing theatrical, that these stickers violate Article 6, Section B of the Greenfield Lakes HOA Code, which clearly states, no resident shall display unauthorized signage or markings visible from the street. I took a step forward, calm and collected. Karen, with all due respect, these aren't unauthorized. They're court-ordered. She paused. Blink. That tiny flicker of hesitation almost made me grin. But it vanished quickly. She pressed on like a bulldozer on a mission. Court-ordered or not, she said, scribbling something into her form, you still need to have signage approved by the board. And I don't recall seeing any such request filed. I could tell she thought that was checkmate. But she didn't know I had already gone 10 rounds with the county. And this sticker? This sticker wasn't going anywhere. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a photo I had taken the day the inspector visited. I turned the screen toward her. This is county code enforcement. That's their guy, right there, placing the sticker. And that, I zoomed in, is the signed notice from Judge Colton. So unless your HOA handbook overrules county law now, I suggest you take a breath. Her face twitched. Just slightly. A micro-expression. The twitch of someone who hates being wrong. Who can't believe a lowly resident just smacked them down with evidence. But Karen wasn't done. Oh no. That wasn't her style. Well then, she snapped, snapping her pen shut and flipping the clipboard against her chest like a badge of shame. We'll just have to see what the board says. I'm calling an emergency meeting tonight. This will be dealt with. She turned and began her march back to the SUV, heels tapping, hips rigid, one hand holding her sunglasses in place like a battle helmet. And just before she opened her door, she looked back at me and said the words I should have written on a t-shirt: "You can't just do what you want in this neighborhood." And I smiled. Because I could. Because I did. And because Karen had no idea she was about to step way over a legal line. As Karen climbed out of her Lexus like a drama queen stepping onto center stage, it was already obvious she was itching for a confrontation. Her eyes locked onto the bold fluorescent orange sticker posted firmly on my gate, and I swear her lip curled like she just sniffed expired milk. With one hand on her hip and the other gripping her pen like a dagger, she pointed directly at it. "Those stickers are an eyesore." The words came out in a tone drenched in disgust, loud enough that two joggers passing by actually turned their heads. I stayed quiet for a second. Not because I was unsure what to say, but because I was honestly marveling at how fast she managed to go from zero to HOA meltdown. Not even a hello. Not a good morning, or how's the family. Just straight to sticker shaming. She started pacing in front of my property like an angry real estate agent at a failed open house. "Do you realize," she continued, "that these hideous neon stickers are visible from the street? From 3 houses down. They completely ruin the charm of the neighborhood." I chuckled. "Karen, charm left this street the day you installed 6 security cameras and a no trespassing sign on your bird bath." She didn't flinch. Sarcasm bounced right off her like bullets on a tank. She was locked in now, committed to the performance. Her head whipped toward the sticker again, as if hoping it had magically disappeared. It hadn't. And it wasn't going to. "Look at the color," she shrieked, as if the orange was causing her physical pain. Couldn't they have picked a more muted tone? Something that blends in better with the community's palette? I raised a brow. "You want the county to coordinate their legal notices with your flower pots?" She ignored the jab. Typical. Karen walked up to the sticker now, just inches away, inspecting it like she was planning its assassination. She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a pair of disposable gloves. Yep, gloves. I guess court-ordered stickers are considered biohazards in her world. As she slipped them on, she said, "I know graffiti when I see it. And this is just lazy vandalism with a government stamp on it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "This," I said, walking over and pointing right at the seal on the sticker, "is a legal enforcement notice. From the county. It's here because my garage was crushed by a tree and the HOA refused to help." She blinked, slightly thrown off. "That wasn't our responsibility." "No kidding," I shot back. "Which is why I went to court. And the judge issued this order while the cleanup and insurance investigation is ongoing." She scowled. "And they expect the rest of us to just look at that for weeks?" "Apparently, yeah. Until the issue's resolved." Karen folded her arms like a kindergarten teacher about to hand out detention. "This is not acceptable," she declared. "This isn't just about your property. It's about everyone's experience. Guests drive down this street. Homebuyers take tours here. And now they're going to think we have gang activity." I almost laughed. Gang activity? It says code enforcement, property dispute pending. Not Bloods and Crips, suburban showdown. She didn't laugh. Instead, she reached out and poked the edge of the sticker with a long gloved fingernail, clearly testing whether she could peel it off without getting in trouble. That's when I stepped in. "Karen," I warned, calm but firm, "don't touch that." She looked at me, dead serious. "Well, someone has to." "No. No, they don't. In fact, if you read this part right here," I tapped the sticker, pointing to the text printed in bold, "Do not remove. Violators may be subject to penalty under County Code 18-7." She squinted at it, then scoffed. "I'm sure they don't mean me." Ah yes. The Karen motto. Rules apply to everyone but her. I took a breath, trying to stay composed. "You realize," I said slowly, that removing this sticker is tampering with a legal notice. It's like pulling down a condemned building sign or a health warning at a restaurant. She waved me off. Oh, don't be dramatic. I'm not removing it permanently, I'm just adjusting it for aesthetics. I have a laminator. I can print something that looks way more professional. A laminator? Was she planning to DIY a court order? I shook my head in disbelief. You seriously don't understand how bad of an idea this is, do you? She crossed her arms. What I understand is that you're turning this place into a hazard zone, and I will not let the board overlook it. Then she pulled out her phone and snapped a photo of the sticker. For the record, she said proudly. I leaned back on my heels, arms crossed. Perfect, I replied. Make sure you send that to code enforcement too. I'm sure they'll love knowing someone's planning to adjust their legal signage. Karen froze. Just for a second. A flicker of hesitation. But instead of backing off, she spun on her heel and started walking back toward her SUV. I'll be back tomorrow, she said, over her shoulder. And if that eyesore is still up, we'll see what the HOA has to say. As her car engine roared back to life and she sped off like she had just dropped off a warrant, I looked at the sticker, still clinging proudly to the gate. Ugly? Maybe. But it wasn't going anywhere. As Karen's Lexus peeled away from the curb with that dramatic growl, the dust hadn't even settled before I felt my jaw tighten. My knuckles were white from how tightly I was gripping the bike wrench still in my hand. Every cell in my body wanted to shout something. Anything. Something biting, sarcastic, maybe even a little too honest. But I didn't. I bit my tongue. Because I've learned something the hard way over the past year. You don't win against people like Karen by yelling louder. Nope. You win by being smart, patient, and above all, calculated. So, I just stood there in the middle of my driveway, my son's half-fixed bicycle leaning on its side, and I watched the queen of the HOA screech off to whatever throne room she occupied during her daily reign of neighborhood terror. My son Jordan peeked out from behind the oak tree in the yard, soccer ball under one arm, eyes wide. Dad, he asked softly, is that lady gonna come back again? I sighed. Probably. He nodded like he already knew the answer and went back to kicking the ball across the yard. I envied his ability to just let things bounce off him. At 10 years old, his world was goals and snacks. Mine was legal notices and HOA threats. Still, I kept my cool. Because Karen wasn't just a nuisance, she was a liability in pearls. And I couldn't afford to make a wrong move. Because this whole mess? It was already complicated enough. Let me explain. A few weeks back, a massive tree from my neighbor's yard, old, rotting, and clearly neglected, came crashing down during a storm. It flattened half my garage and left part of my fence dangling like sad spaghetti. Luckily, no one was hurt, but the damage was substantial. I did what anyone would do. I called my insurance company, filed a claim, and reached out to the neighbor, who, by the way, happens to be a former HOA president and a longtime buddy of Karen's. You'd think the HOA would have helped mediate the situation. I mean, isn't that what they're for? Apparently not. When I contacted them for assistance, just basic cleanup help or even some support during the assessment, I was met with cold, robotic replies. Karen, of course, was leading the charge. The HOA cannot be held responsible for acts of God or neighborly disputes. That was the exact wording of the email. Acts of God? Neighborly disputes? It was more like act of negligence. That tree had been leaning at a precarious angle for years. I had even warned them once in a community meeting. Karen rolled her eyes and moved on to the next topic, mailbox paint colors. So, I did what I had to do. I filed a legal property damage claim and submitted documentation to the county. The court took it seriously. An inspector came out, surveyed the damage, and marked the area as under enforcement review. Until the dispute was resolved, the county placed those bold stickers on the gate, garage door, and mailbox, warnings to anyone messing with the site. They weren't pretty. They weren't supposed to be. They were official. And most importantly, they were legally protected. Karen didn't care. To her, this was just another example of someone daring to do something without her personal sign-off. What bothered me most wasn't the sticker itself, it was what her reaction represented. It wasn't just a sticker she was offended by. It was the fact that someone like me, a regular guy who didn't show up to every HOA meeting with 3 ring binders, had the nerve to do something without her approval. And now, she wanted to make an example out of me. I clenched my jaw again. Part of me wanted to write a 10-page letter explaining the entire situation and shove it in her mailbox. Another part wanted to call the HOA board and let them know their enforcer-in-chief was about to commit a legal violation by tampering with a court notice. But instead, I did what I do best. I documented everything. I pulled out my phone, walked around the property, and took high-resolution photos of every sticker, every angle, and every sign of damage. I backed it up to the cloud, printed copies, and made a file marked HOA Interference, July Incident. Because I had a gut feeling this wasn't over. Karen would be back. She always came back. And next time, she wouldn't just yell at the sticker. She'd try to remove it. And that's when she'd cross the line. Not just an HOA guideline, but an actual prosecutable line. I could have yelled. I could have argued. But I bit my tongue. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's the setup for a bigger win. To anyone just walking by, the bright orange stickers plastered on my gate and mailbox probably looked like cheap warnings, like something a construction crew slapped up before digging a trench or fixing a gas leak. But these weren't those. These weren't cheap. They weren't temporary. And they weren't optional. These were official county enforcement notices, printed on thick vinyl, sealed with an anti-tamper coating, and emblazoned with the seal of the county courthouse. In bold black lettering across the top, they read, "Notice of Enforcement. Do not remove under penalty of law." Beneath that was a detailed legal code reference, the county office that issued it, and a QR code linking to a case file that detailed the whole messy story: photos, assessments, incident reports, everything. It was, in legal terms, what you call a visible protective notice, a big in-your-face sign that said, "There's a legal matter happening here. Hands off." But to Karen? To Karen, it was just ugly. I mean, sure. These stickers weren't exactly designed with Martha Stewart in mind. They didn't come in pastels. They weren't printed in cursive font. They didn't match anyone's flower beds. They were made to stand out, on purpose. The county needed them to be unmissable, so that no one could pretend they hadn't seen them. So that no neighbor, no contractor, no overzealous HOA busybody could mess with a property under active legal status and claim they didn't know. But here's the part that made it even more serious. Each sticker had a tamper detection strip, a thin red line embedded along the edge that would discolor the moment someone tried to peel it off. If the sticker was removed or damaged, it would leave a traceable residue with a serial number underneath. That number was tied to the case file and marked in the inspector's report. That way, if someone tampered with it, even accidentally, the county would know. And there would be consequences. Karen didn't realize that. Or maybe she didn't care. And honestly, that's what made her so dangerous. Because most people, when they see something stamped with the words "under court order," take a step back. They ask questions. They call someone. They check the website. They wait for clarification. Karen? Karen grabs a glove and peels. Because in her world, her authority outweighs actual legal process. And in her world, anything that threatens her picture-perfect neighborhood is an enemy of the state, her state. I remember the day the county official came by to post them. His name was Miguel. Nice guy. Late 40s, big laugh, wore work boots and a reflective vest even though he was just doing paperwork. He walked the property with me, took detailed photos, measured the damage from the fallen tree, and documented the risks. When he opened his satchel and pulled out the stickers, I said, "You're really going to put those up?" He nodded. "We have to. It's part of the legal protection process. These notices let everyone know this property is under enforcement, and no one, not neighbors, not contractors, not even HOA reps, can interfere." I remember asking him, "What happens if someone pulls them down?" He smiled, but not the happy kind. "We fine them. If they're persistent, we escalate. It's tampering with an official government notice. It's not a slap on the wrist, it's a misdemeanor in this county. Repeat offenses can go higher." He peeled the backing off one and smoothed it down on my mailbox like he was placing a seal on a king's decree. Then he placed another on my front gate, and a third on the garage wall, right near the area where the crushed roof still drooped from the impact of the neighbor's tree. Before he left, he handed me a laminated sheet with the county contact numbers, case reference code, and a QR code linked to the file. "Keep this in case your HOA gets nosy," he said, as if he already knew what I was dealing with. He wasn't wrong. Not 24 hours later, Karen was already circling the property like a vulture in a pantsuit. She hadn't read the sticker. She didn't want to read the sticker. To her, it wasn't a legal boundary, it was a challenge. An insult. A blemish on her suburban utopia. But to me, those stickers were protection. They were shields. They were my legal armor against the HOA's constant pressure and the neighbors' refusal to take responsibility for the disaster their dead tree caused. And they were the only thing keeping Karen's clipboard crusade from turning into an all-out war. Until she ripped one off. With gloved hands and smug confidence, she pulled the first sticker from my mailbox like she was doing me, and the entire block, a favor. And as soon as she did, that red tamper line flashed pink. The serial number underneath glowed faintly in the morning light. And just like that, Karen had crossed a line she didn't even know existed. To really understand how all this chaos with the sticker-slaying HOA queen named Karen began, you have to rewind a bit, about 8 weeks back, on a stormy Thursday night that changed everything. It started with wind. Not just any wind, the kind that sounds like it's trying to tear your roof off. That evening, the forecast had warned of heavy gusts and possible lightning, but around here, we'd heard that before. Most of us just rolled our trash bins inside and hoped the power wouldn't flicker out before bedtime. I was inside helping Jordan with his science project. He was building a volcano out of cardboard and baking soda. My wife, Ava, was in the kitchen, prepping school lunches for the next day. The lights dimmed once or twice, but the storm hadn't fully hit. Then came the crack. It sounded like a shotgun blast, loud, sharp, and close. The kind of sound that sends you leaping off the couch before your brain even processes it. And then the crash. The house shuddered slightly. The windows rattled. And something massive slammed into the side yard with a thud that reverberated through the floorboards. I ran outside in a flash, not even grabbing a coat. What I saw made my stomach drop. A huge gnarled oak tree, at least 40 feet tall, had snapped clean in half of the trunk and landed squarely on my garage roof. The shingles were crushed. The gutter had torn off like paper. My fence had exploded into splinters. There were branches hanging like giant arms across my yard and neighbor's lot. One of them had even punctured the back of my shed. It was chaos. Rain started falling harder, pounding against the wreckage like Mother Nature adding insult to injury. By the next morning, the damage was crystal clear. Half my garage roof was caved in. The support beams had cracked. My tools and lawn equipment were buried under debris. The shed? Done. And the privacy fence between my house and my neighbor's property? Obliterated. Now here's where things got messy. The tree didn't belong to me. It came from my neighbor's yard, Bob Delaney, an aging retiree with a love for barbecue, conspiracy theories, and ignoring home maintenance. I'd warned him twice before about that tree. It had been leaning at an angle for over a year, and the bark had split down the side. Termites, rot, fungus, you name it, that tree had it. I was never confrontational about it. I'd mentioned it during friendly conversations. Hey Bob, might be a good idea to get that checked out. He always waved me off. It's been standing for 30 years, it's not going anywhere. Turns out it was. Straight into my garage. I called my insurance company right away, and they were understanding, but careful. If the tree was diseased or dead, the liability falls on your neighbor, they said. You'll need to file a property damage claim and have an official assessment. Fine. I could do that. But when I approached Bob the next day, calm and reasonable, his reaction was less than neighborly. He shrugged. Well, it's not my fault. It was a storm. Act of God. I reminded him gently about the warnings. His response? You got a problem, take it to the HOA. That was his magic shield, the HOA. He'd been on the board for 6 years before stepping down, and his best friend Karen was still the pit bull at the gate. He assumed the HOA would protect him. Spoiler, they tried. When I contacted the HOA to file a damage report, I received a curt email from Karen herself. Dear Mr. Thompson, the HOA is not responsible for natural storm damage. Please work this out privately with your neighbor. Regards, Karen. I replied back with photos of the rotten trunk, 2 dated emails where I'd mentioned the leaning hazard, and even a screenshot of a text from Bob joking about the old man tree that refuses to die. No response. So, I escalated. I filed a property damage claim through the county. It wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. Someone had to fix the garage, and it wasn't going to be me alone. The county took the claim seriously. They reviewed the inspection notes, looked at the photos, and sent out an official to survey the scene. Within days, I received a call. Your property is now under an active enforcement review. Please post these legal notices visibly until further notice. Do not remove or tamper with them. They are protected by law. And just like that, the stickers arrived. One for the gate. One for the mailbox. One for the busted garage. Bright. Orange. Loud. To me, they meant progress. To Karen? They were graffiti in her gated kingdom. But behind every sticker was a story of neglect, arrogance, and a failed system that had let people like her and Bob ignore responsibility for far too long. That's why I wasn't backing down. And that's why when Karen peeled off that first sticker like she was cleaning up the streets, she had no idea she was peeling off the county's warning label and walking straight into legal trouble. After the tree crashed into my garage and the full extent of the damage settled in, along with the soaking wet tools, the smashed lawnmower, and the crumpled roof like a soda can, I did what any responsible homeowner in an HOA neighborhood would do. I contacted the Homeowners Association. I figured that's what they're there for, right? To help maintain the neighborhood, resolve disputes, and if nothing else, offer some kind of support in situations like this. Boy, was I wrong. I still remember sitting at my kitchen table that morning, sipping reheated coffee and typing out the most respectful, well-worded email I could muster. I included everything: photos of the damage, a timeline of events, notes from the insurance rep, even the history of that rotting oak I'd warned my neighbor about. I ended the email with a simple, polite request. I am requesting HOA assistance in mediating this issue with my neighbor, as this tree poses an ongoing safety risk to the community. Any guidance, cleanup assistance, or follow-up would be greatly appreciated. Send. I sat back thinking, they'll see the photos. They'll understand. Surely, they won't ignore something this serious. Wrong again. 3 hours later, I received a reply from Karen herself. Subject: Property damage request from HOA Secretary Karen W. Time: 11:43 a.m. To me, dear Mr. Thompson, thank you for your email. As stated in our HOA bylaws, the association is not liable for property damage resulting from natural causes or personal disputes between neighbors. We recommend handling this matter privately with the involved party. Regards, Karen W. HOA Secretary. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Natural causes? A tree that had been visibly diseased for years finally falling wasn't exactly a mystery of nature. I could have accepted the damage if it had been a freak accident: lightning, hurricane, alien invasion. But this? This was negligence, plain and simple. Still, I kept my cool. I replied, "Hi Karen, respectfully, I believe this qualifies as an HOA safety issue given the condition of the tree, its proximity to shared fencing, and the extent of damage. I've attached additional documentation, including prior communication where the tree's condition was mentioned. Please let me know if the board will reconsider or help initiate a dialogue with the neighbor." I didn't get a response for 2 weeks. When I followed up, I got nothing but silence. It became clear they weren't going to lift a finger. So I started asking around. Spoke to a few other neighbors. That's when I learned the truth. This wasn't the first time Karen and her little board had brushed off serious concerns. One neighbor had a backyard drainage issue that flooded 3 adjacent properties. Another had their sidewalk torn up by HOA hired contractors with no warning or cleanup. Both had reported the problems. Both were told, in so many words, "Not our problem." Karen's favorite phrase. As long as the houses looked pretty and the lawns were evenly cut, the HOA didn't care about the actual well-being of the residents. They were about appearances. Image. Optics. Curb appeal. And my broken garage with an orange sticker on the front? That was a blemish in their perfect suburban painting. Still, I didn't give up. I submitted an official request for board assistance form. I printed it, signed it, dropped it off at the HOA office mailbox. 2 days later, I got the same message: "We suggest you handle this neighbor to neighbor." I was furious. Not because I expected the HOA to pay for the damage, but because I expected them to at least act like they cared. To maybe help me contact Bob, or recommend an HOA-approved mediator. Something. Instead, they retreated behind the shield of their bylaws, hiding behind the letter of the rules while ignoring the spirit of community. I even overheard Karen on her morning walk one day, talking to another board member. If we get involved with his mess, everyone will expect us to solve their tree problems. Can you imagine the precedent? So that's what I was to them, a precedent. An inconvenience. A potential crack in their flawless facade. That's when I decided I wasn't going to wait around for their permission or support. I filed the county claim. I followed the process. I got the stickers. And I made sure everything was done by the book. Because I knew that eventually, someone like Karen would come around trying to challenge it, not because it was wrong, but because it looked wrong. And if there's one thing people like her can't stand, it's something they can't control. So when Karen told me the stickers were unauthorized, I wanted to laugh. Because the only unauthorized thing happening around here was the HOA pretending they had more power than the law. They made their position clear, not our problem. Fine. Now it was the county's. And pretty soon, it was going to be Karen's. After weeks of silence from the HOA and that smug "not our problem" email from Karen, I decided to stop waiting for a miracle and start fighting back, with the only thing HOA tyrants and stubborn neighbors respond to: legal documentation. You see, I didn't want to fight. I wasn't out to sue anyone or cause drama. But when your neighbor's tree crushes your garage and everyone just shrugs and tells you to figure it out, you reach a point where you stop asking for help and start demanding accountability. So, I filed a formal complaint with the County Property Damage Office. This wasn't just some online form buried in a government website. It was a real, official process. I gathered every photo, every email, every ignored warning I'd sent to Bob, my neighbor, about his tree. I even printed the weather report from the night of the storm, just to show the winds weren't hurricane level but still strong enough to knock over a rotting, unmaintained tree. I drove to the courthouse in town and submitted everything in person. The clerk, a middle-aged guy with coffee stains on his sleeves and a surprisingly kind smile, reviewed the documents, nodded slowly, and said, "You've got a case." He handed me a yellow receipt and gave me the name of the assigned county investigator, Miguel Rivas. Miguel showed up 3 days later with a clipboard, a county badge, and a deep understanding of how small-town disputes spiral out of control. He surveyed the garage damage, walked the property line, measured the distance from Bob's tree to the fallen fence, and jotted notes the entire time. "You're not the first one I've seen out here," he told me, glancing at the neighboring yards. "This HOA's been getting a little creative with how they avoid responsibility." I raised an eyebrow. "So you've heard of Karen?" Miguel grinned. "Heard of her? Let's just say she called the county office twice to try and cancel this inspection, claiming she had internal authority over neighborhood disputes." I blinked. "She what?" "Yeah," he laughed. "Didn't go anywhere. She's just an HOA secretary. County code overrides her little rulebook." I almost burst out laughing. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt since the tree hit: hope. Miguel filed his report. He sent an official letter to Bob stating that the tree's condition constituted negligence and that responsibility for the damages could not be waived as an act of God. The photos, the warnings, the evidence, it all painted a clear picture. The next step was court. Bob was served papers. Not a lawsuit, yet, but a civil hearing notice. The court would determine liability, assign repair responsibilities, and decide whether fines or orders of compensation were necessary. You'd think at this point Bob would finally pick up the phone, come over, and try to work it out like neighbors. But instead, he ran straight to Karen. And that's when the HOA stepped in, not to help me but to defend him. Karen fired off a mass email to the neighborhood, thinly veiled of course, without using names, claiming that certain residents were escalating private matters into costly legal actions that burden the community's reputation. She even implied that my stickers, yes, the county-issued ones, were unauthorized graffiti designed to undermine the board's visual integrity. But guess what? The court didn't care about visual integrity. They cared about evidence. At the hearing, which lasted a brisk 45 minutes, the county presented everything. Miguel testified. I showed photos, warning messages, contractor estimates, and even a copy of the HOA's dismissal emails. Bob didn't have much to say. Karen sat in the back of the room, arms folded, lips pursed like she'd bitten into a lemon. I wasn't even sure why she came, maybe to support her friend, maybe to glare at me, maybe just to feel important. But she didn't speak. She wasn't invited to. When the judge read the findings, I nearly grinned. It is the court's opinion that the fallen tree was in a hazardous state prior to the storm and that prior warnings were provided by the claimant. The responsibility for property damage rests with the property owner from which the tree originated. Boom. That was it. The court ordered Bob to pay for the damage, including garage repairs and partial fence replacement. He had 60 days to comply. And the stickers? They were part of the official enforcement order, legally required to stay up until the work was completed, inspected, and signed off by the county. Which meant Karen could scowl at them all she wanted. She could hate their color, complain to the board, or schedule emergency curb appeal meetings every night, but she couldn't remove them. And if she did, she'd be breaking county law. The judge made it crystal clear, these enforcement notices are to remain in place and untouched. Any tampering or removal may be treated as interference with a legal order. I walked out of that courthouse with the original sticker placement forms, the judge's statement, and Miguel's business card. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't drowning. I wasn't just defending my home, I was standing up against a system that tried to bully me into silence. I didn't start the fight, but I was going to finish it. Because when the HOA said, "Not our problem," the court said, "Yes, it is." And as for Karen? She was about to learn that her clipboard had no power here. If there's one thing that HOA boards like ours rely on, it's silence. They count on residents being too busy, too tired, or too intimidated to push back. They create rules, some real, some made up, and enforce them through guilt trips, letters stuffed with bolded threats, or passive-aggressive newsletters masked as updates. And more often than not, it works. Because most people don't want to deal with the drama. They just want peace. A clean driveway. A little quiet. But not me. Not this time. Karen and Bob both assumed I'd do what everyone else had done in the past. Grumble quietly, clean up the mess, and move on. They thought I'd roll over the moment the HOA dismissed my concerns. They thought a strongly worded letter and some neighborhood gossip would shut me down. They were wrong. Because the second that tree hit my garage, and Karen refused to lift a finger, I knew I had to handle things my way. And once the court sided with me, once the stickers went up, I think they panicked. But instead of owning it, instead of apologizing or even just backing off, Karen doubled down. She began treating me like some kind of public enemy. Suddenly, I was that guy on the block. You know, the one who doesn't respect the system. The one who involves lawyers. The one who brings outside attention to our quiet community. Word started spreading. Not just about the stickers, but about me. One morning, I was watering my front lawn when a neighbor I'd chatted with a dozen times before suddenly acted like I didn't exist. Just walked right past, eyes on the sidewalk. At the grocery store, someone muttered, "Can't believe he sued old Bob," under their breath as they passed me. And then came the Facebook group. Oh yeah, the secret HOA Facebook group. Karen and her inner circle had apparently formed a private page where concerned homeowners discussed issues affecting the harmony of our neighborhood. Translation: it was a digital gossip pit. Someone sent me screenshots. There were entire threads about me, about my property, about the garage, about the stickers. Comments like, "Why hasn't he just fixed the thing himself?" Some people don't understand the importance of community standards. Those orange stickers make our block look trashy. One even said, if he wanted to live without rules, he should have bought land in the woods. I stared at my screen for a long time, jaw tight. It wasn't just about the damage anymore. This was about control. About image. About Karen needing to prove that no one could challenge her authority and come out clean on the other side. But what she didn't realize was that I wasn't fighting back out of pride. I was fighting back because this mattered. Because I didn't want my son growing up thinking you should let people walk all over you just to avoid making waves. Because I didn't want to live in a neighborhood where power meant silencing people instead of helping them. And because if they could do this to me, a court-approved, legally backed homeowner, what chance did anyone else have? So I didn't just sit quietly while they spread rumors. I responded, legally and publicly. I emailed the HOA board, not just Karen but the full panel, and attached the court documents, the enforcement orders, and a statement from the judge. I highlighted the parts about legal tampering and potential criminal charges for removal of notices. Then I copied in the county inspector's email, just to make sure everyone knew how serious this was. But that wasn't all. I made a post in the official HOA Facebook group. Not the secret one, but the public-facing page everyone saw. The one Karen couldn't control. Here's what I wrote. To anyone concerned about the orange enforcement stickers on my property, these notices were issued by the county court as part of an active property damage case. The stickers are protected under municipal law and may not be removed, altered, or covered up. While some may consider them an eyesore, they are a result of months of being ignored by the HOA and my neighbor after a preventable accident. I took the proper legal steps to hold the responsible party accountable, and I won. I'm not trying to make trouble. I'm just trying to protect my rights and my home. If you have questions, feel free to ask me directly. Mark Thompson, Lot 14-inch, no threats. No anger. Just facts. The comments were quiet for a while. But then something interesting happened. People started messaging me. Quietly. Privately. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in months started saying things like, "Good for you, man." Someone needed to call them out. They did the same thing when my daughter tried to build a wheelchair ramp. "Let me know if you need a hand fixing the garage. I've got tools." Turns out, I wasn't the only one who'd had enough. They thought I wouldn't fight back. They thought I'd be too polite, too quiet, too scared. But they forgot one thing: I know how to play by the rules. And when the rules are on my side, people like Karen have no idea what's coming. It happened on a Wednesday morning. The sun was barely up, the air still cool with that crisp bite of early spring. I was inside, flipping pancakes for my son before school, when I heard the clang of metal from outside. Not a bird, not the wind. A sharp, deliberate clank, like something was being pried off. At first, I ignored it. But then came the second clang. And then I heard the mailbox rattle. I wiped my hands, peeked through the blinds, and froze. There she was. Karen. Standing at the front of my property in her usual beige slacks and wide-brimmed sun protection visor, wearing those surgical gloves like she was performing open-heart surgery on the sidewalk. And in her hand? One of my county enforcement stickers, crumpled, torn, peeled from my mailbox like a piece of old tape. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I bolted for the door, stepping outside as calmly as I could muster. But the fury bubbled under my skin like magma. "Karen," I called, voice low, "what are you doing?" She didn't even flinch. She turned, eyes sharp with that same haughty HOA-fueled energy that made you want to double-check your grass height. "Oh," she said, like I'd interrupted her mid-chore. "This? I'm just removing this unsightly thing. You really should have done it by now. It's making the block look like a construction zone." I walked closer, slow and deliberate. "Karen, that's a court-ordered sticker. You just removed a legal notice." She waved her gloved hand like she was swatting a fly. "Please. It's not like I destroyed government property. It's just a sticker. I'm doing you a favor." I was stunned. She said it with the confidence of someone who truly believed she was above the law. As if that sticker was optional. As if her taste in curb appeal overruled county code. "You understand what that was, right?" I asked, my tone sharper now. "That's tied to a civil enforcement case. It has a serial number. It's traceable. You just tampered with legal evidence." She crossed her arms. "Don't be dramatic. The HOA gave me full authority to clean up these kinds of issues." That was when I knew she'd gone too far. Because there's being nosy. There's being petty. And then there's interfering with a legal investigation. "You don't have the authority to touch that," I said, my voice firm now. "You weren't even named in the case. And that sticker, that, was issued by the county. Not your little neighborhood club." Karen scoffed and took a step closer, clearly trying to assert dominance. "Well, maybe if you handled your business without dragging the rest of us into it, I wouldn't have to step in. We have real estate agents touring the neighborhood. That orange garbage on your gate? It's making people nervous." I couldn't help but laugh, darkly. Not because it was funny, but because it was just so incredibly Karen. This wasn't about community. This wasn't about protecting the neighborhood. This was about her control. The sticker represented something she couldn't micromanage. Something bigger than her. something that dared to exist in her kingdom without her approval. And now she'd ripped it off, like she was the law. Big mistake. I took out my phone and snapped a photo. Karen stepped back, frowning. "What are you doing?" she barked. "Documenting evidence," I said. "I'll be forwarding this to the county code enforcement officer." "Remember Miguel? The guy you tried to stop from inspecting my garage?" She stiffened. "You wouldn't." "I absolutely would. And I will." Just then, my son stepped out on the porch behind me. "Dad, do we need to call the police?" Karen's eyes twitched. I turned and nodded gently to Jordan, trying to stay composed. "No, buddy. Not yet. We'll let the county handle it." That must have hit Karen where it hurt. She tossed the torn sticker onto my lawn like it was beneath her and hissed, "You think you've won, but you're just a problem. A nuisance. People like you don't last long in this neighborhood." I smiled calmly. "Maybe not. But people like me don't back down, either." Karen stormed off, her walk fast and rigid like a robot running out of battery. She climbed back into her Lexus and slammed the door with so much force it set off her own car alarm. Beep. 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 She fumbled with her keys while the alarm echoed down the street. The irony was beautiful. Later that day, I emailed Miguel. Attached photos. Described what happened. He replied within an hour, "Thank you for the documentation. This qualifies as sticker tampering and interference with an active enforcement order. We'll be issuing a citation." Boom. Karen had finally done it. She hadn't just crossed the line, she'd sprinted past it, waving her clipboard like a flag, right into county jurisdiction. And now? She was officially on record. You'd think after being warned, glared at, and directly told by a court-appointed inspector not to touch the stickers, Karen would have backed off. But no. Karen doesn't back off. She doubles down. So when she peeled off that sticker from my mailbox, she didn't just break the law, she gave me the evidence I needed to bury her case and reputation. Because here's the part she didn't know, my house? It has cameras. 4 of them. 2 on the corners of the roof, 1 above the garage, and 1 hidden in the mailbox post, installed a year ago after a package thief made the rounds through our neighborhood. They don't just record motion. They record audio. And they back up to the cloud automatically. So while Karen stood there in her sun hat, surgical gloves, and smug righteousness, peeling that sticker like she was cleaning graffiti off a high school locker, every second was being recorded in 1080p HD clarity. Her voice? Crystal clear. Her face? Front and center. Her attitude? Unmistakable. It's not like I destroyed government property, doing him a favor. The HOA gave me full authority. All of it, caught in one glorious reel of suburban arrogance. I reviewed the footage that night after dinner. I was calm, even sipping tea. But when I saw the video, my jaw dropped, not because of what she did, but because of how confidently she did it. Like she truly believed she was untouchable. The next morning, I compiled the evidence, a video file labeled, "Sticker Tampering, HOA Karen," dated XX/XX/2025, a copy of the court enforcement order screenshots of the sticker serial numbers before and after removal, a copy of Miguel's prior inspection notes, and then I emailed everything to the county. Not a single angry word. No insults. Just this, per our conversation regarding sticker tampering, please find attached video and image evidence of an HOA representative unlawfully removing a county enforcement sticker from my mailbox. The incident occurred at approximately 7:45 a.m. on date. Serial number XXX123A was assigned to the sticker and is now defaced. Less than 2 hours later, I received a response, "Thank you for your prompt documentation. This constitutes violation of Municipal Code 22-401, interference with a legal notice. A formal citation will be issued to the individual in question. If you are contacted or harassed further, please inform our office immediately." That was all I needed to hear. But I didn't stop there. No. Because if Karen wanted to fight dirty, I'd fight smart. I uploaded the footage to a private, unlisted YouTube link. Not public. Not shareable. But easily accessible if the HOA tried to twist the narrative. And I sent one final email, this time to the entire HOA board. "Dear board members, on date, HOA Secretary Karen W. was recorded on video removing a county-issued legal enforcement notice from my property. This was done without my permission and in direct violation of a court order. The attached video and documents have been submitted to the county enforcement office, who confirmed this action qualifies as unlawful tampering. I have no desire to escalate further. However, I expect that the board takes appropriate action to address this behavior and ensure no additional interference occurs during the enforcement period. Sincerely, Mark Thompson, Lot 14-inch. I didn't get a reply for a day. But when I did, it was from the HOA president. Not Karen. Not her little committee of clipboard warriors. The president himself. Mark, thank you for bringing this matter to our attention. We were not aware of Karen's actions and will be meeting to discuss internal conduct procedures. Please continue working with the county directly, and let us know if there are further issues. Translation? We're backing away from Karen. Fast. Later that week, I spotted Karen out front again, this time, walking faster, eyes avoiding mine. No visor. No gloves. No clipboard. I even waved. She didn't wave back. Because this time she knew she got caught. Not just in a mistake. Not just in a lapse of judgment. She got caught on camera, crossing a legal line that no HOA authority could save her from. And the best part? I didn't have to scream. I didn't have to threaten. I didn't have to stoop to her level. I just pressed record. And let the law, and the lens, do the rest. I thought the footage would be the end of it. I figured, after Karen was caught red-handed on camera removing a court-ordered sticker, the HOA would do the smart thing, distance themselves, issue a quiet apology, and let the county handle the rest. But nope. This is the Green Pines HOA we're talking about. And if there's one thing they love more than fresh mulch and matching mailboxes, it's protecting their own, no matter how wrong they are. It started subtly. 2 days after I sent the footage and the HOA president replied, I got a new letter in the mail. It was from the HOA office, folded neatly in their usual cream-colored envelope with that smug little embossed tree logo. Inside was a notice of non-compliance. Apparently, my garbage bins were visible from the street for over 24 hours, and that violated Section 4.3b of the community guidelines. Seriously? I opened the video timestamps from my camera. Garbage pickup was at 6:10 a.m. The bins were rolled back by 6:40 a.m. A 30-minute gap. No violation. No mess. Not even a bag out of place. I sent back an email, respectfully, I've reviewed my security footage and my bins were out no longer than required. Please retract this notice. No response. Next day, another notice. This time about faded paint on the side gate and a tripping hazard due to a raised sidewalk slab. Mind you, the faded paint was literally natural weathering on a side gate that got hit when the tree fell, the one still under legal enforcement. And the raised sidewalk? It had been like that for 3 years. I'd tripped on it twice before I even moved in. Suddenly, it felt like I was being targeted. They couldn't attack the stickers. They couldn't undo the court's decision. But they could harass me with technicalities and pretend it was routine. But it wasn't just me who noticed. That same week, my neighbor across the street, Linda, a retired schoolteacher, knocked on my door with a small stack of papers in hand. You get one of these? She asked, holding up her own violation notice. About what? I asked. She rolled her eyes. Apparently, my hedges are 1 inch too tall. I blinked. Seriously? She nodded. I've had those hedges for 5 years. No one said a word, until now. We compared letters. Same format. Same wording. Same signature at the bottom. Karen W., HOA Secretary. Even after being caught, even after the citation, she was still acting like nothing happened. Still issuing warnings. Still flexing what little power she had left. That's when I realized, Karen wasn't acting alone. She still had support. Or at least silence. And silence in an HOA is the same as endorsement. I sent another email to the full board. This is the 3rd non-compliance notice I've received since submitting video evidence of Secretary Karen W. tampering with a legal court order. The timing and lack of response suggest retaliatory behavior. If I do not receive confirmation that these violations are being reviewed in good faith, and not as harassment, I will contact legal counsel and the county ombudsman for HOA oversight. This time, I CC'd Miguel and attached the time-stamped security footage again, just in case. 24 hours later, I got a much different reply. Subject: retaliation concern from HOA President, Greg L. Time: 3:12 p.m. to me, Mark. Thank you for your continued communication. The board was unaware of the recent notices issued and will be conducting an internal review regarding any actions taken by individual board members. Please disregard any violation letters issued between date and date while we investigate. We appreciate your patience. Boom. Karen had gone rogue. And the board knew it. But they weren't about to throw her under the bus publicly, yet. They needed time. Space. A quiet exit, maybe. Except Karen wasn't planning to go quietly. That weekend, during the monthly community walkthrough, Karen showed up again, clipboard in hand, acting like nothing had happened. She stopped at my property, paused, squinted at my fence, and scribbled something down. I stepped outside. Need another picture for your files, Karen? I asked, voice steady. She didn't look up. Just muttered, still a member of this board. Still doing my job. But this time, I wasn't alone. 2 neighbors, Linda included, had followed the board around on the walkthrough. They watched her closely. She looked rattled, like someone who just realized her seat of power was being yanked out from under her. A few days later, word spread, an emergency board meeting had been called. Karen didn't show up at the next walkthrough. Didn't issue any more notices. Didn't attend the block potluck. Didn't update the HOA newsletter. She just disappeared from the public eye. They tried to cover for her. But the cover-up was worse than the crime. Because it proved what I already knew. Karen wasn't the only problem. She was just the loudest. And now? The whole board was finally feeling the heat. The HOA hadn't held an emergency meeting in over 2 years. Not when a gas leak forced a temporary evacuation. Not when the neighborhood power grid blew out for 36 hours. Not even when a raccoon infestation shut down the community playground. But suddenly, after Karen got caught peeling off a legal county sticker on camera and tried to bury me in retaliation notices, an emergency meeting was urgently necessary. The announcement came via email and paper flyer, slipped into every mailbox like it was a routine invitation to a bake sale. Notice: an emergency HOA board meeting will be held on Thursday 6 p.m. at the Green Pines Clubhouse. Subject: internal conduct review. Homeowners are welcome to attend. Green Pines HOA board. Let me tell you, nothing draws a crowd in a gated community like drama in khakis. By 5:45 p.m., the small clubhouse was packed. Folding chairs filled, neighbors lined up along the walls, and several stood outside with arms crossed and Starbucks cups in hand. People were whispering, texting, even recording on their phones. I arrived 10 minutes early and took a seat in the second row, right behind Linda and her husband George, who wore his "This is my grumpy old man" shirt proudly. Karen? Nowhere in sight. The board sat at a long plastic table up front, President Greg, Treasurer Sonia, and VP Randy all looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. A copy of the bylaws sat in front of Greg like a legal Bible. Everyone else had manila folders. Greg tapped the mic. Okay. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. This meeting is in response to recent events involving board conduct and interaction with county enforcement. He didn't say Karen's name. But everyone knew. He cleared his throat and continued. We've received formal documentation from a homeowner regarding the unlawful removal of a county-issued enforcement notice, followed by multiple non-compliance letters issued during the pending enforcement period. Several heads turned toward me. Greg kept going, his voice clipped but rehearsed. We want to emphasize that the board does not condone interference with legal notices or use of board authority to retaliate against homeowners. That is a direct violation of Section 5.2 of our own governing rules, not to mention county code. Boom. He paused, then added, we've also reviewed video evidence, which clearly shows the unauthorized removal of the sticker. As a result, the board has voted unanimously to suspend the issuing authority of Secretary Karen W. until further review. You could feel the ripple across the room. People murmured. Someone let out a low whistle. George chuckled under his breath. I raised my hand. Greg nodded. Yes, Mr. Thompson. I stood up slowly. Just to clarify, I said, Is the board acknowledging that the violation notices sent after I submitted evidence were retaliatory? Greg blinked. We're currently reviewing those for procedural misuse, and if they're determined to be improperly issued, they will be retracted from the HOA's permanent record. Including the paint and sidewalk ones? I asked. He nodded once. Yes. All of them. That was the confirmation I needed. But it wasn't enough. From the back, a hand shot up. It was Mrs. Patel, a quiet homeowner who rarely attended meetings. She stood. Are we also going to talk about the Facebook group? She asked. The private one where board members, including Karen, talked about residents behind their backs? Another wave of murmurs. Greg shifted uncomfortably. We are aware of that group, yes. While it was not officially affiliated with the HOA, some members of the board did participate, and we are drafting new language regarding social media conduct to prevent this kind of issue moving forward. Someone else stood, Derek, the dad from Lot 8. My daughter's ramp request was denied last year by Karen. Said it wasn't aesthetically aligned. Are you gonna revisit that now that we know what she's really about? Greg glanced at Sonia, then nodded. Every denied request issued by Secretary W. over the last 12 months will be reviewed. That sealed it. The crowd didn't cheer, but they didn't have to. You could see it in their eyes. The shift had happened. The spell was broken. Karen's iron grip on the HOA was finally cracking. And just then, Karen walked in. Late. Flustered. Clipboard in hand like it was a badge of honor. She froze when she saw the packed room, and even more so when she noticed the projector screen displaying a paused frame of her removing the sticker, still from a surveillance video. Greg looked up. Karen, please take a seat. She didn't move. Karen, he said again, firmer, we're in the middle of a conduct review. She opened her mouth, probably to launch into some long-winded excuse, but instead, she turned around and walked out. No words. No defense. Just the sound of her sensible shoes echoing through the lobby as she vanished into the night. That was the last time I ever saw her at a board meeting. After that infamous emergency meeting, it was like Karen had been erased from the neighborhood. One day she was the clipboard queen, patrolling driveways, measuring lawn lengths with her judgmental eyes, and scribbling notes like she worked for the FBI. The next? Gone. No more daily walks. No more passive-aggressive HOA emails. No more surprise courtesy warnings slipped into mailboxes at 5:30 a.m. Karen just vanished. At first, no one quite knew what happened. There was no official announcement, no email titled change in HOA leadership or board member resignation. The silence was deafening, almost suspicious. You'd think for someone who once gave a 20-minute PowerPoint on holiday wreath uniformity, Karen would have at least signed off with a dramatic farewell. But nope. She left in the most un-Karen way possible, quietly. Naturally, the theories started swirling. Linda from across the street heard she had been asked to step down. Derek swore he saw movers at her house one afternoon, said he watched them carry out boxes marked HOA files, and a 5-gallon tub labeled paint, approved trim colors. Another neighbor claimed Karen had been reported to the county ethics board for impersonating a municipal official during her crusade to remove my sticker. Whatever the truth was, one thing was certain, Karen no longer ruled Green Pines. Her name disappeared from the HOA newsletter by the following week. Her title, Secretary and Compliance Officer, was replaced with a generic vacant slot. And when the next round of HOA violation notices went out, none were signed. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt peaceful. There were no random overnight citations. No frantic meetings about the color temperature of porch lights. No weird dog breed size guidelines sent out in Comic Sans font. The grass kept growing. The sky didn't fall. Life moved on, without Karen. And you know what? It was better. People started talking to each other more. Instead of reporting a neighbor for having weeds, they offered them gardening tools. Instead of complaining about the wrong mailbox font, they laughed about it on the group chat. The absence of fear changed everything. Even the HOA board seemed relieved. President Greg and the others looked lighter at the monthly meetings, like they'd taken off tight shoes they'd been wearing for years. The tone shifted from strict to supportive. And then, a few weeks later, we got a new flyer, Community Open Forum, Come share your thoughts on how to improve Green Pines HOA. We're revising the bylaws, and we want your voice heard. I nearly choked on my coffee. Open forum? Bylaw revisions? They wanted input. It was a full 180 from the Karen era, when suggesting a fence color other than eggshell white was treated like high treason. At that forum, I stood up and calmly shared my story, not to gloat, but to explain how HOA power unchecked can ruin a community instead of serving it. And to my surprise, people listened. No one rolled their eyes. No one interrupted. In fact, several others followed with their Karen horror stories. One guy said she fined him $75 for having a seasonal welcome mat in February. Another neighbor had been denied approval for solar panels, despite state incentives, because Karen thought they clashed with roof aesthetics. Turns out, everyone had been suffering in silence. But now we were free to speak. By the end of the forum, Greg said something that stuck with me: we don't want to be feared. We want to be trusted. And that was the moment I realized the neighborhood had healed. Not completely. Not perfectly. But enough to breathe again. Karen may have vanished from the HOA, but her absence was more powerful than her presence had ever been. It showed people what the community could look like when control wasn't confused with leadership. A few months later, a moving truck did appear in front of Karen's house. Real this time. No rumors, no whispering, just a crew boxing up years of compliance decor and rigid suburbia. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. Didn't post in the group chat. Didn't leave a note. She just left. Someone said she moved to a retirement village across the state. Others said she joined another HOA board somewhere else. Honestly, I didn't care. Let her enforce flowerpot rules in another town. Green Pines was done with her. And me? I fixed my garage. Repainted the side gate. Even put up a new mailbox, one that didn't need a sticker. But you know what I did put on it? A tiny plaque. Just 3 words: court-ordered calm. Because peace, real peace, isn't silent. It's the sound of a community finally being heard. I thought it was over. Karen was gone. The HOA was silent. My court-ordered stickers had long been removed, legally this time, and the garage repairs were complete. My son rode his bike in the driveway again. The sun hit the porch just right. The mailbox didn't rattle with surprise violations. But peace in Green Pines? It's always temporary. It started with a letter. No HOA header. No official signature. Just a plain white envelope in my mailbox, addressed by hand. Inside, a single page typed with one sentence: "You may have won the battle, but some of us are still watching." No return address. No name. No contact info. Just that. It was childish. Petty. Creepy, even. And I would have tossed it if not for what happened next. The following week, I came home from work and noticed something off. The motion light over my garage had been unscrewed, just enough that it wouldn't turn on. My trash cans had been tipped over, but nothing was missing. Then came the scratches. Long, deliberate gouges down the side of my newly painted side gate, the very one that Karen once tried to fine me for. At first, I thought it was an accident, maybe a kid with a scooter. Until I checked the camera. Whoever it was had worn a hoodie and moved carefully, deliberately avoiding the cameras. They knew where the blind spots were. They'd studied them. And that meant only one thing: this wasn't random. This was retaliation. But from who? Karen was gone, or at least no longer on the board. But she had her followers. People who bought into her narrative that I was some villain who brought courts into the neighborhood. That I was disrespecting the rules. That I was dangerous. I tightened my home security system. Added more cameras. Moved the motion lights. Even installed a low-voltage perimeter alarm, just enough to alert me if anyone stepped near the garage after dark. Then I went to the police. Not to escalate, but to document. I filed a report. Brought the letter. The gate photos. The camera footage. The scratches. The timing. The officer nodded, took notes, and said something that stuck: sometimes when people lose control, they lash out in the dark. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. But that wasn't even the worst part. A few nights later, my son found it. He was out playing basketball in the driveway when he noticed something wedged under the back tire of my car. It was a nail strip, like the kind used by cops to stop runaway cars. Homemade. Rusted. If I had reversed out of the driveway like usual, I would have blown all 4 tires. Worse, if my son had been on his scooter behind me? I don't even want to think about it. That's when I realized, this wasn't just harassment anymore. It was sabotage. I filed a second police report. This time, the officer's face changed. He asked more questions. Took fingerprints. Sent someone out to canvass the area. Word spread fast. And just like before, the community reacted. Only this time, they rallied around me. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact started knocking on my door, offering to walk the block with me at night. Linda brought over fresh cookies and a motion-sensing spotlight. George installed extra floodlights facing the street. Derek helped reprogram my cameras. And someone, no idea who, left a note on my porch, "You're not alone in this anymore." Because the truth is, bullies don't disappear just because you win. They go underground. They switch tactics. They play dirty. But here's the part they always forget. Once people see the truth, you can't unsee it. Karen may have been the face of the HOA's corruption, but she wasn't the only one infected by that need for control. There were still whispers. Still those who clung to her idea of order, willing to punish anyone who didn't fall in line. But this time, I wasn't scared. This time, I wasn't isolated. This time, I had allies. Because when you stand your ground, even if it's just about a sticker, people notice. And when you refuse to back down, you give others permission to do the same. That's the thing about fighting back. You think you're doing it alone. Until you realize your courage woke up everyone else too. Let me take you back, before the drama, before the court orders, before the HOA turned my property into a battlefield. It all started with a storm. A massive one. The kind of storm that turns driveways into rivers and tree branches into missiles. It hit our town in early March, ripping through fences, flooding gutters, and knocking out power on half the block. My family and I huddled in the living room as the wind howled like a freight train. When morning came and the sky finally cleared, I stepped outside to inspect the damage, and my heart sank. A massive oak tree from my neighbor Bob's yard had fallen. Not into the street. Not onto the lawn. But right through my garage roof. It split the rafters, smashed the shelving, crushed half of my tools, and bent the steel support beam like a pretzel. The entire structure was unstable. You couldn't even walk in safely without risking a collapse. Now let me be clear, I wasn't angry at Bob. Storms happen. Accidents happen. But Bob's tree? It had been leaning dangerously for over a year. I'd brought it up, twice, in casual conversation. I even offered to split the cost of having it professionally trimmed. He laughed it off both times. "Oh, oak's been there for 40 years, he said. She's solid." Turns out, she wasn't. So when I went to Bob politely and asked if he'd be willing to file an insurance claim or contribute to the repairs, he got defensive. Said it wasn't his fault. Said it was an act of God. Said if I wanted to pursue compensation, I should take it up with the HOA. So I did. I wrote up a full incident report and submitted it to the HOA. Included photos, timestamps, neighbor witnesses, everything. Their response? Property disputes between neighbors are outside the scope of HOA jurisdiction. Okay. Fine. So I went to my insurance. They agreed to cover some of the damage, but they'd go after Bob's insurance first. Which, by the way, he refused to cooperate with. For weeks, I tried to handle it civilly. Quietly. No lawyers. No escalation. But the moment I started repairs, the HOA stepped in. Apparently, because I had started temporary repairs on the garage structure without prior architectural approval, I was in violation of neighborhood code. Yep. The same HOA that refused to help me hold Bob accountable was now threatening me over my attempt to clean up his mess. They demanded I submit a garage rehabilitation plan to the architectural committee, which met once a month. The next meeting? 3 weeks away. Meanwhile, the city inspector came by and red-tagged the garage. It was declared unsafe and a hazard to public safety. That's when the first sticker appeared. Bright orange. Unmissable. Stuck right on the mailbox post. Unsafe structure, do not enter, code enforcement case number 5947, I didn't mind. Honestly, it helped my case. But Karen did. She hated it. Said it lowered the neighborhood aesthetic. Told me the sticker needed to be removed immediately. I explained it was court-ordered. She rolled her eyes and said, "Well, I hope you like orange, because you're making this block look like a construction zone." That was the moment I realized she didn't care about safety. She didn't care about fairness. She cared about control. The orange sticker was a symbol, not of disrepair, but of a system she couldn't control. Over the next few days, 2 more stickers went up, one on the garage itself, and another on the side gate. Each one was required by code enforcement. Each one marked the damage site for inspection and legal documentation. Each one was protected under municipal law. But to Karen, they were ugly. They were public. They were a threat to the fantasy she'd worked so hard to build. So she started her campaign. She called the inspector. Tried to claim I had faked the damage report. Demanded that the stickers be removed in the name of community standards. When that didn't work, she took matters into her own hands. You know what happened next. She peeled one off. Got caught. Got cited. Got embarrassed. But the real story behind those stickers? It wasn't about aesthetics. It wasn't about HOA violations. It wasn't even about the garage. It was about accountability. Those stickers represented something Karen had never dealt with before: consequences. They told the world, something happened here, and someone is responsible. And in her world, that kind of truth had no place. But in mine, it was the beginning of change. You'd think after the sticker drama, the emergency HOA meeting, and Karen's quiet vanishing act, the neighborhood would finally settle into peace. But something still felt unfinished. Like the last piece of the puzzle was missing. And then 3 weeks later, it dropped into my lap. Literally. I was sorting the mail at the kitchen counter when a thick, white envelope slid out of the stack. It had no return address, but it was heavier than usual. Inside were several folded pages, a USB stick, and a short note written in blocky, anonymous print. Figured you might want to see the truth before they shred it. Don't ask who I am. No signature. No name. The note felt like something from a spy thriller, not suburban Green Pines. But when I plugged in the USB drive, my jaw hit the floor. The files were audio recordings. Meetings. Conversations. Some at HOA board meetings. Others, private. All featuring Karen. And what I heard proved everything. The first clip was labeled, private_HOA_MTG_2. 12. MP3 inch in it. Karen could be heard saying, "Honestly, if we push hard enough with fines, he'll either give up or sell. That garage is an eyesore, and I don't care what the county says, it makes our neighborhood look cheap." Another board member, voice uncertain, replied, "But the structure's under court review. If we fine him," Karen cut them off, "then we fine him under our rules. Let the county play catch up." My stomach turned. The next clip, worse. Karen talking about me personally. He's one of those types. Military, thinks everything's about freedom. You give people like that an inch, and they'll bring in broken down trucks and chicken coops next. Not on my watch. Not on your watch. It wasn't your watch, Karen. It was everyone's. And you were supposed to protect this neighborhood, not wage a personal vendetta because you didn't like a court-mandated sticker. Another recording had Karen bragging about denying my neighbor's ramp request. I didn't deny it because of the ramp. I denied it because she's a gossip. Told her a non-neutral paint color was against code, even though it's not. There it was. In her own voice. Proof that she was weaponizing the HOA. That she wasn't just misinformed, she was malicious. The USB had 6 audio files total. Each one, more damning than the last. And each one, carefully labeled and time-stamped. It all made sense now. Why the board looked so uncomfortable at the emergency meeting. Why Karen never fought the citation. Why she left without a word. Because they knew. They all knew. And someone, maybe one of them, had finally had enough. The next day, I called my lawyer. Not to sue. Not to escalate. But to document. I wanted these files submitted alongside my previous complaints, so they'd never be buried. Never be accidentally deleted. Never be lost in transition. Then I sent a very simple email to the HOA board. You may want to review the enclosed audio files before your next meeting. I believe they explain quite a bit. Sincerely, Mark Thompson, Lot 14. I didn't threaten legal action. I didn't demand anything. I just sent the truth. 2 days later, I received a response. Subject: regarding submitted evidence from Greg L., HOA President. Time: 2:42 p.m. Mark, thank you for sharing the files. We were unaware of the full extent of the conduct in question. The board is currently scheduling a formal review of all cases handled by former Secretary W. over the past 18 months. We deeply regret any undue stress the situation has caused and will be implementing new bylaws regarding oversight and transparency moving forward. Please consider this a formal acknowledgement of your evidence and your persistence in bringing this matter to light. Greg, it wasn't an apology. Not exactly. But it was accountability. And in a place like Green Pines, where power, gossip, and control used to reign, that was rare. And valuable. The recordings circulated quietly. They weren't made public, but word got around fast. People who once looked at me like I was the problem suddenly started saying hi at the mailbox. I caught more waves, more smiles. Even Bob, whose tree started all of this, came by and offered to cover part of the repair costs to make things right. The truth doesn't always explode. Sometimes it seeps. Slowly. Patiently. Until the lies have nowhere left to hide. And when it does, even the most powerful clipboard in town can't stop it. Just when I thought the nightmare was over, when the garage was repaired, the truth was out, and the neighborhood finally felt livable again, Karen came crawling back. Not in person. No. She knew better than to show her face after the audio files leaked. After the community heard her mocking disabled residents, bragging about fake citations, and scheming against me like I was some kind of enemy combatant in a war she created. But snakes don't retire. They regroup. And Karen? She still had venom left. It started with a legal letter. Delivered by courier. Not the mail. Not dropped off by a neighbor. A guy in a suit and sunglasses showed up at my door like I was being served on live television. The letter was on letterhead from a law firm I'd never heard of, Graves, Finch and Holloway PLLC. Inside, 4 typed pages of nonsense. The gist? Our client, Ms. Karen W., alleges defamation of character, false representation, and emotional distress stemming from unauthorized distribution of recorded conversations and ongoing harassment. I read it once. Twice. Then I laughed. Because the audacity was Olympic level. This woman had removed a court-ordered legal notice from my mailbox, lied to her own board, tried to bury me in retaliatory citations, referred to disabled neighbors as aesthetic threats, bragged about manipulating community rules for personal vendettas, and now? She was suing me. For what? Telling the truth? The recordings weren't stolen. They were submitted by a whistleblower. And more importantly, they were real. No editing. No trickery. Just Karen. Being Karen. Still, a lawsuit is no joke. I forwarded the letter to my attorney. He scanned through the nonsense and replied with the legal equivalent of an eye roll. This is a bluff. They're hoping you'll panic and settle before it gets laughed out of court. I didn't panic. But I did prepare. Because here's the thing, once someone's lost their power, the only move they have left is desperation. Karen's mask had been torn off. Her reign was over. But she couldn't stand being irrelevant. She didn't want justice. She wanted revenge. She didn't want an apology. She wanted control, again. So I responded. Officially. Calmly. Through my lawyer. We submitted a statement confirming the files were provided anonymously, proof they were used only in HOA matters and not publicly posted, evidence of her behavior leading up to the HOA citation, copies of her own statements on record. The county even backed me up, stating publicly that the recordings had been helpful in identifying misconduct within a recognized association, and confirmed the HOA citation against her remained valid. Boom. Karen's case collapsed like a badly built shed in a windstorm. Less than 3 weeks later, her lawyer quietly withdrew. No apology. No retraction. Just silence. But even that wasn't her final move. Oh no. Because Karen, master of pettiness, had one more card up her sleeve. She tried to run for board again. Yep. In the next election cycle, 6 months after vanishing from public life, 6 months after her reputation was torn apart, Karen submitted her name for re-election to the Green Pines HOA board. The audacity was almost impressive. She didn't campaign in person. She didn't do house calls or host BBQs. She dropped off typed flyers into mailboxes at night like some weird suburban Santa Claus. The flyer had a photo of her standing in front of a rose bush, smiling awkwardly, with a headline, "Experienced. Fair. Proven." And then this gem: I stood for structure. I stood for standards. I stood for Green Pines when others wouldn't. I've made mistakes, but my heart has always been in the right place. My wife almost choked on her coffee when she read it. "You think she means structure like the garage she tried to fine us over?" she joked. I wasn't even angry anymore. Just stunned. Karen thought she could rewrite history. That the audio didn't exist. That the HOA had forgotten. That the community would forgive and forget and hand her back the clipboard of power like nothing ever happened. Spoiler alert? She lost. Spectacularly. She got 3 votes, one of which, I'm pretty sure, was her own. The rest went to real members of the community, people who listened, helped, and respected their neighbors. People who saw HOA leadership as a responsibility, not a throne. And Karen? She disappeared for good after that. House sold. Name removed. Gone. No forwarding address. No goodbye post. No thanks for the memories. Just, a bad chapter finally closed. You wouldn't believe the difference. Green Pines, once known for its manicured lawns, iron-fisted HOA, and whispered threats about mailbox height, actually became pleasant. No more secret fines. No more anonymous complaints. No more fear that stepping outside with a non-approved porch cushion would land you in suburban court. With Karen gone and the truth finally public, something remarkable happened. The neighborhood started acting like a neighborhood again. The first sign was the notice board. For years, it had been locked behind glass at the clubhouse, accessible only to HOA members, updated monthly with rules, warnings, and the occasional passive-aggressive reminder that garden gnomes are not permitted on front lawns. But now, that board was covered in flyers from neighbors. Free seedlings, take what you like. Lost cat, answers to pudding. Looking to borrow a power washer for the weekend, happy to trade fresh-baked banana bread. It wasn't just cosmetic. It was symbolic. The power had shifted, from control back to community. President Gregg, clearly shaken by the Karen debacle, actually followed through on his promises. The HOA board revised the bylaws, introducing new clauses that would have made Karen combust on the spot. All violation notices must now include photographic evidence. Anonymous complaints? No longer accepted. Homeowners have 10 business days to respond before any fines are issued. And the best part? The Architectural Review Committee was replaced by a rotating panel of volunteers, regular residents. For the first time, the system didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a conversation. My neighbor Derek, who'd once been fined for letting his daughter use sidewalk chalk on the driveway, ended up running a summer kids' art weekend. The HOA actually sponsored it, bought the chalk in bulk and put out lemonade stands on the corners. Imagine that. The same neighborhood that once issued citations for unapproved potted plants was now handing out snacks and sidewalk paint. Then came the garage rule reform. After my ordeal, tree damage, stickergate, the Karen meltdown, the HOA updated its structural repair policy. Now, if you experience an emergency repair certified by a city inspector, you're allowed to begin temporary repairs immediately. No red tape. No HOA delay. They even called it the Thompson provision. I didn't ask for that. But I can't lie, it felt good. Not because I needed credit, but because it meant no one else would have to go through what I did. But the most powerful change? The people. Before, neighbors stayed behind fences. Eyes peeked through curtains. Sidewalk conversations were brief, cautious, everyone afraid that the person they were speaking to might also be the one who reported them for leaving a trash bin visible for 20 minutes. Now, we had a block party. A full-blown, music blasting, potluck sharing, kid running in the street celebration. The HOA helped coordinate it. No one argued about decorations. No one measured the decibel level. We laughed. We told stories. We joked about Karen, lightly, respectfully, because honestly, everyone was just relieved. Even Bob, the neighbor with the fallen tree, came over. He pulled me aside, handed me a cold beer, and said, "You were right. About the tree. And about all of it." I just nodded. We didn't need to say much more than that. The truth is, neighborhoods don't need perfection. They need patience. They need kindness. And above all, they need people who see each other as humans, not compliance problems. Karen ruled with fear. But fear doesn't build fences. It builds walls. And when those walls come down, magic happens. Kids play outside longer. Elderly neighbors get help carrying groceries. People wave, not because they feel obligated, but because they want to. One morning, I stepped outside and noticed something small but telling. A new homeowner, young couple, first house, was putting up a small bench on their front porch. It was painted bright blue, not exactly within palette, and next to it sat a garden gnome holding a fishing rod. A few years ago, that would have triggered 3 HOA notices and a Karen drive-by. Now, I just smiled. And so did everyone else. Green Pines isn't perfect. No place is. But we learned something through all this. A community isn't about rules. It's about respect. And when you protect your voice, your rights, and your neighbors, even if it's just a sticker on a garage door, you plant seeds for something better. Not just cleaner lawns or better fences, but real connection. It was a Tuesday. Calm, quiet, unremarkable. Until my phone rang, and the caller ID read, County Enforcement Office. I stared at it for a full 5 seconds. Not because I was scared, those days were behind me, but because I had no idea why they'd be calling. My garage had long since been repaired. The citation Karen had tried to fight was resolved. All the court-ordered stickers had been removed, legally, by the inspectors themselves. I hadn't so much as parked crooked in months. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I answered. "This is Mark." A woman's voice responded, cheerful but direct. "Hi, Mr. Thompson. This is Angela from County Code Compliance. You're not in trouble, I promise. Actually, we wanted to thank you." That was a sentence I hadn't expected to hear. Come again?" She chuckled. "We've been reviewing internal reports on how HOA complaints intersect with local ordinances. Your case was instructive, let's put it that way." I couldn't help but smile. Well, I'm glad my personal disaster could be educational. Angela continued. "Actually, we've started training seminars for new inspectors, using your footage. The sticker removal, your documentation, the hearing. All of it." Wait, like, I'm a case study now? Exactly. You wouldn't believe how many residents don't realize their local codes override HOA preferences. Your case shows how overreach can be challenged the right way. Civilly. Legally. With results. I leaned against the counter, stunned. After all that drama, I'd become a teaching tool. But it didn't stop there. Angela paused, then said, "There's one more reason I'm calling. Would you be open to meeting with our department as a community liaison?" Now that made me choke on my coffee. A what now? A liaison. We're forming a pilot program where we connect county officials with residents in HOA-run neighborhoods. People like you, folks who've been through it and understand both sides. We want to build bridges, not just enforce rules. For a moment, I said nothing. Not because I was unsure, but because I was honored. I had gone from being targeted, harassed, fined, and threatened with legal action, to being asked to help make things better across the county. All because I stood my ground. Not with fists. Not with rage. But with documents, patience, and principle. The meeting was set for the following week. They held it at the County Services Building, same one I'd walked into months earlier when I submitted my sticker tampering evidence. This time, though, I wasn't there to report anything. I was there as a voice. Angela greeted me at the door, introduced me to the team, 5 inspectors, a program director, and a community relations officer. Each one shook my hand like I was a guest speaker. We sat in a conference room with a projector and paper cups of bitter coffee. But the vibe? Surprisingly warm. Angela started the presentation, Then queued up a video clip, Karen on camera, peeling the court-ordered sticker off my garage post and looking around like a kid caught stealing candy. The room murmured. Then the next slide, an email exchange between me and the HOA, where I had respectfully cited the municipal code and requested confirmation of my rights. Angela turned to me. "Mark, walk us through your thought process here." And for the next hour, I did. I explained how the HOA ignored the real issue, my storm-damaged garage, and instead focused on bureaucratic control. How Karen had retaliated, not regulated. How I used public records, kept detailed notes, and refused to let intimidation silence me. I explained how important it was that the county stood up for me, because without that legal weight, I would have just been another homeowner getting steamrolled by unchecked HOA power. When I finished, they applauded. Not because I was heroic, but because I was clear, consistent, and honest. Afterward, the program director pulled me aside. "You've got a calm way of explaining chaos," he said. "That's rare." He handed me a folder titled Community Pilot Advocate. Inside was a schedule of local HOA meetings, upcoming code compliance town halls, and an official badge. Not a police badge, more like a liaison pin. But still, it felt real. "We'd like you to attend a few as a civilian rep," he added. "Not to call people out, but to show what working with the county looks like." I nodded slowly. For once, I wasn't just reacting to Karen's chaos, I was reshaping the system that let it happen. That night, back home, I hung the liaison pin on a corkboard in my office. Next to it, I placed a copy of the original citation Karen tried to remove. The sticker she hated. The one that started everything. And next to that? A handwritten note from my son. "Thanks for fixing the garage, Dad. You won." And you know what? He was right. Not because Karen lost, but because the truth outlasted her. It happened on a crisp Saturday morning. I was mowing the front lawn, something I actually enjoyed now that the HOA wasn't breathing down my neck, when I noticed a moving truck backing into Karen's old driveway. Unit 8. The infamous fortress of rules and ruler of nonsense. The house had been on the market for a while after she left, probably because no one wanted to inherit the bad karma still soaked into the shutters. But now, someone had finally bought it. A tall man hopped out of the cab first, mid-30s, athletic, with aviator sunglasses and a beard that screamed weekend barbecue captain. He stretched his back, waved at the driver, then turned to the house with a big relieved smile. A moment later, a woman stepped out of the passenger side. Short hair, cargo pants, clipboard in hand, but not the Karen kind of clipboard. This one looked organized, not weaponized. She laughed as she pointed at the door and said something that made him laugh too. They looked normal. Nice. Sane. I shut off the mower and walked toward the sidewalk. The man noticed me and waved. "Hey there. You must be one of the neighbors." I returned the wave and crossed the lawn. Guilty as charged. "I live in Unit 14, just over there." He stepped forward, offering a firm handshake. "I'm Dan. This is my wife, Lena. We just moved here from Austin." "Welcome to Green Pines," I said, smiling. "You're taking over the old, Unit 8, huh?" Dan laughed. "Yeah, the realtor told us the last owner was particular. That's one word for it." Lena chimed in, grinning. She left behind an entire filing cabinet full of HOA violation forms. We found it in the garage. I think she printed out copies of the bylaws and highlighted random words. I burst out laughing. Sounds like her. Did she leave behind the emergency siren too? Dan blinked. Wait. What emergency siren? I raised an eyebrow. Never mind. If you didn't find it, maybe she took it with her. You dodged a bullet. We all laughed again. It felt good. Really good. Because for the first time, I wasn't meeting a neighbor through the lens of suspicion or HOA paranoia. I was meeting a neighbor who actually wanted to live here, not rule it. Over the next hour, I helped them unload a few boxes. No formal invitation. No fuss. Just neighborly instinct. A few more residents joined in. Derek from across the street brought over cold water bottles, and Linda from next door offered them a tray of mini muffins, blueberry and banana nut, naturally. The best part? No one was watching through blinds. No one was taking notes. No one was reporting unapproved curbside items. It was just people helping people. Imagine that. Later that evening, Dan stopped by with a six-pack of craft beer and a genuine thank you. We sat on my back porch, watched the sun sink behind the houses, and talked. Not about bylaws. Not about sticker drama. But about real life. His job in IT. Lena's Etsy store. Their dog Machi, who they were picking up next week from her sister's place. We were nervous, Dan admitted. We heard horror stories about HOAs. But this place seems different. I took a sip of my beer and nodded. It wasn't always. Trust me. This place used to feel like a prison with flower beds. What changed? I thought about that for a second. Then I answered. A storm knocked a tree onto my garage. Then the HOA tried to fine me for fixing it. Their queen bee ripped off a court-ordered sticker, got caught on camera, and it all unraveled from there. Dan blinked. Wait, that was you? Yep. The garage guy. Man, our realtor definitely underplayed that story. We both laughed. Before Dan left, he paused at the edge of the porch. You ever think about joining the HOA board yourself? After everything? I shook my head immediately. Nah. I'm not looking to hand out fines. Just trying to keep the peace. He raised his bottle. To that. To that. That night, I sat in the living room, lights low, ceiling fan humming. My wife was reading a book. My son was curled up with the dog. And I realized something. The scariest thing about bad leadership isn't just what it does. It's what it prevents. Because now, with Karen gone, the HOA sane and decent neighbors moving in, Green Pines finally had the chance to become what it was always meant to be, a home. Not a battlefield. Not a chessboard. Just a place where people can live, grow, and breathe without fear of a sticker, a scowl, or a surprise citation. It wasn't planned. I swear. But fate has a funny way of circling back, especially when you live one county over from the most notorious ex-HOA president in the Tri-County area. I was driving home from a contractor supply store, picking up wood to build a backyard planter box, when I took a detour through the outskirts of Riverview Heights. GPS had flagged a road closure, and I figured I'd take the scenic route past the river trail. That's when I saw the sign, Meadow Ridge, a premier HOA community. Sounded fancy. Gated. Trimmed hedges. Model homes that looked copy-pasted from a catalog. But something about the name tickled my memory. I slowed down, turned into the roundabout, and there it was, Karen's car. Same faded maroon Lexus with the proud to lead bumper sticker still clinging to one corner of the back window. Her garage door was half open, revealing rows of stacked bins and a small metal filing cabinet, the kind she used to drag around our HOA meetings like it held state secrets. I parked at the nearby cafe just down the block. Not to snoop. Not to stir the pot. I just watched. Curiosity, I told myself. But maybe it was more than that. 10 minutes later, I spotted her. Karen. Clipboard in hand. Still wearing the beige slacks and pressed polo uniform that had practically become her skin back in Green Pines. Only now, she walked slower. A bit more cautious. Less queen of compliance, more woman watching her kingdom from the sidelines. She knocked on a neighbor's door, 2 sharp taps, like the HOA summoning bell had been rung. The man who answered was older, built like a retired wrestler, and clearly not impressed. I couldn't hear what was said, but I didn't need subtitles. She pointed to something in his yard, maybe a wind chime? He shook his head. She motioned to her clipboard. He pointed at the street and stepped back into his house. The door closed. Hard. Karen stood there for a moment, stunned. Not furious. Not flustered. Just out of place. Out of power. I walked into the cafe and ordered a coffee. Took the seat by the window with the best view of her house. I wasn't proud of it. But after everything, after she tried to fine me, sue me, and erase my voice from my own neighborhood, I couldn't help but want a moment of closure. The barista, a girl in her early 20s, smiled and said, "You local?" Not exactly. I'm from Green Pines. Her eyes lit up. Oh. That explains it. Explains what? The woman in Unit 6. Karen, right? She tells everyone she used to be somebody. Tries to run our HOA like she owns it. She got rejected for the board last month. No one even seconded her nomination. I nearly choked on my coffee. You're serious? Dead serious. She kept saying she was the reason Green Pines had such high standards. My dad Googled her. You're lucky she left. I laughed under my breath. You have no idea. As I walked out, I glanced back down the street. Karen was alone now. Sitting on her front porch. No clipboard. Just her, a glass of iced tea, and a faint scowl. I didn't wave. I didn't walk over. I didn't say a word. Because she didn't recognize me, at least, not from that distance. And honestly, that was perfect. Because I didn't need revenge. I didn't need an apology. I had peace. And clearly, she didn't. Driving back, I realized something strange. For years, I thought the worst part of Karen was her rules, her fines, her petty wars. But that wasn't it. The worst part was her loneliness disguised as leadership. She didn't want to protect neighborhoods, she wanted control, because she had no connection. No community. Just power. And without it, she was just another bitter person, sipping iced tea on a porch no one visits. I got home just as my son finished painting our backyard sign. A simple piece of wood with bright red letters, Thompson Garden, Gnomes Welcome. It wasn't HOA approved. It didn't match the neighborhood color palette. But every time I looked at it, I smiled. Because it reminded me that home isn't about rules, it's about freedom, joy, and a little color outside the lines. You'd think after Karen moved away, after the lawsuits fizzled, after I helped the county with their training program, things would settle into calm forever. But this is real life. And in real life, sometimes the funniest moments come from the smallest things. In this case, it was a garden gnome. Let me explain. After the whole HOA war, my wife and I decided to lighten things up in the front yard. Nothing crazy, just a little personality. Some hanging planters, a bench by the sidewalk, and yes, a garden gnome. But not just any gnome. This guy was special. He was about 2 feet tall, with a fishing rod in one hand and a mug of foam-topped beer in the other. He wore sunglasses, sandals, and a Hawaiian shirt that said "Chillin' since 1987. We named him Gary. Gary the Gnome. We placed him right by the mailbox, next to a small sign that read, "This lawn is monitored by Gary the Gnome. Violators will be laughed at." It was meant to be a joke. A peace offering to the neighborhood gods. A reminder that we'd survived nonsense, and now it was time to enjoy where we lived. And for the first few days, Gary just stood there, chill as could be. Until one morning, I woke up and found him gone. At first, I thought it was a prank. I checked the yard, the porch, the trash bins. Nothing. No Gary. My wife shrugged. Maybe he got bored and wandered off. Funny, but still, not cool. I posted in the neighborhood Facebook group, "If anyone's seen a sunburnt gnome named Gary, please return him safely. He's emotionally fragile and deeply misses his beer mug." People loved it. Within an hour I had 4 neighbors offering to print missing gnome posters, one person claiming to have seen Gary riding a Roomba, another neighbor photoshopping Gary into a Mission Impossible scene, but by evening, something even stranger happened. A plastic grocery bag showed up on my doorstep. Inside, Gary. But not alone. He now had a tiny handcuff zip-tied to his arm, a printed citation in his lap, and a post-it note that read, "Violation of HOA Aesthetic Regulation 12B, Unapproved Lawn Figures. Rehabilitation Committee." At first, I was annoyed. Someone had clearly gone out of their way to mock the situation. I mean, Rehabilitation Committee? That wasn't even a real thing anymore. We'd voted to dissolve the old Architectural Review Panel. But then I flipped the paper over. And found this written in Sharpie, "Relax. It's a joke. Welcome to the new HOA. P.S. Gary owes me a beer." That's when I knew. Green Pines had officially changed. Instead of Karen's brand of dry, soul-sapping enforcement, we now had humor, community, and connection. The next HOA newsletter even had a section titled, "Gary Watch 2025, Neighborhood Mascot Sightings," and yes, I gave Gary a security upgrade. He now sits on the front bench with a solar-powered motion light and a sign that says, "Steal Gary again and you'll trigger the sprinklers." It's mostly true. But that little prank turned into something amazing. It united the neighborhood. Neighbors started bringing their own gnomes, flamingos, and funny statues. One guy down the street set up a scene where 6 gnomes were fighting off a rubber Godzilla in his flower bed. The old rule about no yard figures over 12 inches in height. Deleted. In fact, the board voted to host a yard decor parade, complete with a sassiest gnome contest, a best miniature scene, and yes, Gary won most chill. For the first time, the HOA didn't feel like a threat. It felt like part of the fun. They weren't handing out fines. They were handing out ribbons. Not citations, just celebrations. And it all started with a gnome that once would have been reported. Now, he was the symbol of what we'd become. A neighborhood that remembered how to laugh, how to live, and how to not take everything so seriously. One afternoon, as my son and I sat on the porch watching Gary watch the street, he asked, "Dad, do you think Karen would have liked Gary?" I smirked. She'd have written him up in 30 seconds flat. My son laughed. Good thing she's gone. Gary's way cooler. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't about Karen anymore. It wasn't even about stickers, garages, or court orders. It was about us. The people who stayed, who changed, who grew, and who finally remembered, a good neighborhood doesn't need a ruler. It needs a Gary. It was a quiet Sunday morning when I got the email. Subject, special request, next HOA meeting from Greg, our HOA president. Now, after everything I'd been through with HOA drama, you'd think any message like that would give me heart palpitations. But these days, it didn't. Not anymore. Especially not from Greg. He was one of the good ones. A guy who had stepped up when the clipboard throne was vacant and made sure we'd never return to the Karen era. The email read, "Mark, we're putting together a neighborhood spotlight section for the upcoming HOA meeting. Something different, more personal. We want a resident who's been through the highs and lows, who's helped shape the new Green Pines. We'd love for you to say a few words. Nothing formal, just talk about your experience, what we've learned, and where we go from here. You're kind of a legend now." Greg, a legend? Me? I chuckled. If being harassed by a clipboard-wielding tyrant and having your garage cited for emergency reconstruction without HOA flair made you a legend, then sure, I wore that title proudly. So the following Thursday, I showed up to the clubhouse. It was surreal. The same building where Karen once ruled with spreadsheets and veiled threats. The same meeting hall where she tried to humiliate me over a legally required county sticker. Now, the walls had been repainted in light blue. There were fresh potted plants by the entrance. Someone had even set out a tray of lemon bars and coffee. No tension. No fear. Just community. The place was packed. Neighbors I hadn't seen in weeks, folks I knew only by their dogs, and even a few new families who just moved in. Greg stepped up to the front. "Before we begin tonight's updates, we've invited someone who's been through a lot with us, someone whose experience shaped how we operate today. Mark Thompson, come on up." I wasn't nervous. Just reflective. I took a breath, stepped up to the front, and looked out at my neighbors. Not strangers. Not adversaries. People. I smiled. "Hey folks. I'm Mark, Unit 14. You probably know me as that guy with the gnome." Laughter. Good start. When I moved to Green Pines, I thought I was moving into peace. Clean streets, quiet nights, friendly neighbors. What I didn't expect was to get into a 6-month Cold War over a court-ordered sticker on my garage. Laughter again, this time louder. But what came out of that wasn't just stress or frustration. It was change. Real change. We learned that rules don't mean anything without fairness. That leadership is about listening, not lecturing. And maybe most importantly, that sometimes, healing starts with a 2-foot plastic gnome named Gary. Now the room was cracking up. We've come a long way, from secret fines and anonymous complaints, to chilly cook-offs, yard gnome parades, and actually talking to one another. And that's the part I'm proud of. Not the fight, but the fact that we didn't give up on each other. Green Pines isn't perfect. No place is. But we're better now. Because we remember what this place is about. It's not about lawns. It's not about siding colors. It's about people. And people, when you treat them with respect, do amazing things. I paused. Looked around. So yeah. I'll keep mowing my grass. I'll keep waving to folks. And I'll keep letting Gary guard the yard. Because this is home now. Not just by zip code, but by heart. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. Not polite claps, real, heartfelt applause. Greg stood up, gave me a thumbs up, and the lemon bars disappeared faster than the leftover HOA drama. Afterward, a couple of residents came up just to say thanks. One guy, new to the neighborhood, shook my hand and said, "I heard about all that Karen stuff. We were hesitant to move here. But now, we're glad we did. This place has a story, and heart." And honestly, that meant more than any HOA position ever could. That night, back at home, I sat on the porch with my wife. Gary the gnome had his little solar lantern flickering beside us. "You were good up there," she said. Yeah. Not bad for a guy who once got fined for storm damage." We both laughed. Then she added, "You think you'll ever actually join the board?" I shook my head with a grin. "Nah. I think I've done enough." There's something poetic about a small sticker sparking a revolution. I used to think big change needed big gestures, petitions, protests, lawsuits. And sometimes, yes, it does. But sometimes, it starts with a quiet defiance. A little rectangle of paper glued to a storm-damaged garage. A county-issued sticker. A legal symbol of due process. A piece of paper Karen couldn't stand to see. And when she ripped it off, she wasn't just tearing at adhesive. She was tearing at the truth. Trying to erase accountability. That sticker became more than just a notice. It became a story. A symbol. A turning point. The day it came down legally, with a county inspector present, clipboard in hand, giving me a respectful nod, felt like the end of a long, dark chapter. But more importantly, it was the beginning of something new. I didn't set out to make a difference. I just wanted to fix my garage. I just wanted to live in peace. But peace, I've learned, doesn't come from silence. It comes from standing up, calmly, firmly, with the law and your neighbors at your side. It comes from refusing to be bullied, no matter how official the bully looks. It comes from choosing community over control. Now, Green Pines isn't just the place where I live. It's where we grew. Together. The HOA now listens. The board rotates. The rules are fair, flexible, and human. Neighbors help each other again. Kids play outside without being too noisy. People decorate their porches without worrying about fines. Gary the gnome is still out front, by the mailbox, faded now from the sun, but proudly standing guard. A relic of rebellion. A mascot of memories. And next to him? That same sign, "This lawn is monitored by Gary the gnome. Violators will be laughed at." Still makes the mailman smile every time. I even wrote about everything. Not just here, but formally. A blog post turned into an article. That article got picked up by a local publication. Then a state newsletter. Then one morning, I woke up to an email from a national magazine. "Would you be open to telling your story on a bigger scale?" At first, I hesitated. I wasn't some activist. I wasn't a politician. I was just a guy who stood up when it counted. But then I thought, if it helps just one person stand up to unfair HOA bullying, it's worth it. So I said yes. And the piece went viral. "The Man Who Beat the HOA," with a sticker and a smile. Cheesy title. But true. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, careful penmanship. It was from an elderly man in Arizona. "Dear Mark, I don't know you, but I feel like I do. Our HOA president tried to evict me from my own home because I installed a wheelchair ramp. Your story gave me the courage to fight back. I showed them your article. I quoted your words. And we won. Thank you. Harold S." I read it 3 times. Tears blurred my vision by the end. Because I realized then, what started as a court-ordered sticker had become a lifeline for someone else. Life goes on, of course. The grass still grows. The HOA still sends reminders, though now they're polite, and signed with thanks for being part of our great community. The clubhouse hosts book clubs and movie nights. The board meetings include pizza and laughter. And every once in a while, someone walks past my house, sees Gary, and asks, "What's the story with the gnome?" I just smile. It's a long one, but it ends well. Because here's the truth: rules aren't bad. HOAs aren't evil. Order is good when it serves people, not power. But when someone like Karen twists the rules to feed their ego, you don't fight back with more anger. You fight with facts, with integrity, with neighbors, and sometimes, with a sticker that refuses to be ignored. So yeah, it started with screeching tires. It escalated with a sticker. It nearly broke me. But in the end, it brought this neighborhood back to life. Not just for me, but for all of us. And that's a story I'll proudly tell forever. Clapperboard, so yeah, a torn sticker started a war. But in the end, truth won. Karen's gone. The neighborhood's alive. And Gary the gnome? Still standing proud. If this story hit home, or if you've ever dealt with a power-hungry HOA, drop a comment, hit that like button, and subscribe for more wild neighborhood tales. Because sometimes, the smallest things spark the biggest change. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Asterisk.